Welcome. Oh, welcome to the podcast, Jordana. I am so excited to have you here and welcome to the chat. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me
Yeah.
on, Erica.
Yeah.
I'm just excited to chat with you.
Cool. So I just want to jump into it. What is your morning routine starting to look like these days?
I like that you said these days because I feel like
Yeah.
it changes all the time. I feel like I have my non-negotiables that are really quick. So I always keep my phone on airplane mode overnight, and I won't turn it off of airplane mode until I have like set in my energy for the day. So I used to like go downstairs and do this in my little meditation corner. Um, Now I actually just do it in bed. Like I literally just protect my energy. So I'll do like a little mini meditation and I'll clear away anything that's like not supposed to be there and set up a little protection bubble. And then I get into my morning stuff. So I have a dog, usually, take her out for a walk. Um, I really like having a nice big breakfast. I'm like really into the large breakfast lately. So I feel like I luxuriate in my mornings a bit. Get a bunch of protein in, some fresh fruit, a hot, cozy drink, like a cacao or some electrolytes or a combination of both. And then I get into my day.
I love that. For your energy protection, is it something that just comes naturally, or is there something that you recite? Is it a specific meditation, or does that even look different day to day?
It looks pretty much the same. And I feel like I know we're going to talk all things spiritual because that's what I do. But
Yes.
like energy protection was my introduction to the spiritual world and just understanding energy because I'm a very sensitive empath and I grew up just like feeling completely overwhelmed by the weight of the world and everyone else's emotions. And so I have a very specific thing I do. And actually, I mean, I know you're going to give my information. I do have a free guided energy protection meditation that you can get on my website. And I pretty much do that. It's like a 7 or 8 minute thing, I think. So I have like an order of operations. I don't listen to that meditation, although honestly, sometimes I actually listen to my own if I want to reset. So it's like I clear away the energy first. So I set the intention to do that. It can come through in different ways. The meditation is a great starter if you want a guide and you're not sure what to do. And then I ground into the earth. So I like to feel like roots coming out of the base of my body and just grounding me in for the day, bringing me back from whatever dimensions we go off to in dreamland. And then I wrap myself in an energy protection bubble so that, and, set the intention that I'm not allowing anything to enter that space that is not of the highest love and light, which, especially if you work with people all day long and, I'm working with clients and working through personal things and painful things, sometimes it's just so important to have that barrier so that you're not taking everything on for them.
Yes.
And it's funny, recently I've actually been guided to also put a bubble on my dog. I have like a very sensitive, she's like a 2-year-old, so kind of puppy, kind of not, but she's like I feel like she's a super empath as well. So I'll include her in that and put it on her too. But people visualize it different ways. I just like the idea of the energy bubble is very unique to each person. Some people will like swirl it around themselves. Some people will wrap it. Some people it'll like grow from within you. But yeah, that's what it looks like.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I think my internet was cutting out. Brilliant. So I want to dive more into your spirituality and stuff like that a little bit, where that started. But at first, I want to ask you first, and it might correlate, like we were saying beforehand. What has been your biggest or most recent expansion moment, and how has that kind of shifted your life? I think it happens in so many different ways for people. So that's primarily the focus of the podcast. And I think we can kind of bridge out to a lot of sections from this question.
Yeah, I was thinking about this because you mentioned it before we did our interview. And I was like, I feel like I have expansion moments every week, if not every day. So I was like, what's a really cool one that's recent? I think for me, the career path and career related shifts have really shaped the last few years of my life. I've made changes in the past. I started out in like the corporate marketing and PR world. I spent 7 years there. And then I became, went back to school to become a holistic nutritionist and an entrepreneur and build my business. and then became more of like a spiritual guide, healer, channel. And so I'd say the most recent moment that was coming up for me is I made the decision to drop all of my nutrition stuff,
Mm.
which was my main source of income. So I did a lot of one-on-one nutrition coaching. I worked with people through like long-term coaching programs. I did like functional nutrition, supplementation, all that stuff. Because that's where I started in this space. I had a lot of health issues, and that's what felt like my purpose. And then and it was also a lot of corporate workshops. I was doing a lot of nutrition workshops, which related to my corporate life. And I realized through this whole spiritual journey, which I know we're going to talk about more because it's fun, that I'm really supposed to be on this mission of healing people with like my spiritual gifts, with connection to something greater. And I was receiving a lot of guidance about it, and resistant to it for a while, for sure, because it's scary to say, oh, this is like what's built my career and created a sustainable business, and now I'm going to say goodbye to it.
Yeah.
And I kept some like self-paced nutrition stuff in there. Like people can still DM me if they want access to those programs, but I don't talk about them anymore. And I think the biggest expansion for me in that moment was that, like, I grew up in a world of education and academia, and there's a specific way that you go through things. And, I have a bachelor's degree in journalism. I have a holistic nutrition certification. And the thing that I'm doing now doesn't have that same level of like quote proof or
Like
backup or
qualification.
certification.
Yeah.
It's like, and in spite of that, I've received more confirmation and praise from my clients that like, I'm really good at this and I know this is what I'm meant to do. But talk about expansion. Like that just blows your mind when you realize, yes, everything else in your life is so important to getting to this place. I know I wouldn't be here without all that other education and experience, but allowing yourself to say, this is who I am, and no, I don't have a bunch of degrees to back it up.
Yeah. And feeling like, I feel like so many people can resonate with that, because it's like, I was just thinking about this a lot actually, about imposter syndrome and like how that bleeds into everything that we do. And that kind of can come up when we don't feel like we have these like validations or qualifications or like certificates of like, oh, you know how to do this. And a lot of that, like, I mean, back in the day, you just didn't have certificates. You just went to the healer. You just went, you didn't have any of those things. So like now when society is so like, I guess, praised upon like education and higher education and like I think that helps people's view and understanding of things, I guess. And when you do something so off the road, like it confuses people. And I think it almost like bridges up against something that we together have to dismantle. So it's like something that, if people don't understand something and don't know where to categorize you, it can be very jarring for them. And so then they get confused. So it's like bringing more just, I think, understanding to what the Akashic Records is, what we actually do kind of is like, oh, okay, that makes sense. She doesn't need a degree in it. It's just something that we innately can connect to, and
Okay,
she
sorry.
connects
So you're
to.
asking me to talk about the Akashic Records? Sorry, I missed a
Yes,
word there
yes.
that you said.
Yes, let's get in there. And I also want to know, like, okay, so you did all the corporate and you did this path and nutrition. Like, so you found energetics and spirituality through your own healing? Like, how did that start to like, how did you find that? How did you find the Akashic Records first and this energetics to help you?
How did I get
Where did
there?
that start?
Okay, so it was a journey for sure. I'd say the beginnings of it started well before I actually became quote spiritual or had an awakening of any kind.
Yeah.
But looking back, you can always see the signs. It's like, okay, this was guiding me in this direction. This was here for a reason. Honestly, ever since I entered the corporate world, I had a lot of physical health issues. I developed a lot of food sensitivities and allergies that I never had before. It created huge amounts of anxiety. I would just go home. I would have panic attacks all the time because I would randomly get sick or like my throat would close up and I didn't know why. It was very stressful. And I was also like a very type A perfectionist person who held it all together at work and then fell apart later. So I don't think that helped either. because I was kind of trying to hide it, but it was really taking over my sanity.
Yeah.
And through that, I always loved food. I always was interested in wellness and nutrition. Like I grew up cooking. I was a gymnast, athlete. Like these were all things that were of value. And it was frustrating to me that my body couldn't cope with any of it anymore. So I was like, okay,
Mm.
let's get into this world of holistic nutrition, because if food is hurting me and I can't eat all the things that I love, maybe I can figure out a way to use food as like a tool for my healing.
Mm.
And this was all while I was still in the marketing and PR world. And I just started doing a lot of self-study, which is, I think, how a lot of us get into our passion fields in the end is we're working. And then on the side, it was like, I couldn't wait to go to and from work for my commute. So I could listen to podcasts and like go home at night and read books about it. And I started seeing a lot of positive shifts, just like with the basics of changing my diet and reducing inflammation and adding in more nourishing things. So it led me eventually, I hit my breaking point in career. I definitely, my last job, like by the end of it, I just wasn't being treated well. It was really difficult for me. And I'm grateful because it pushed me to go back to school. So I like quit everything. I was a manager at like, I had a lot of really good companies on my resume. Things looked good. And so that, definitely an expansion moment of deciding, okay, let's toss that all out and start again. And I went back to school full time. And when I graduated, I built my nutrition practice. I started working with clients one-on-one and through corporate workshops to help them to heal from the things that I had gone through. And I was seeing really amazing changes. I actually built a credible business within a couple of years, and my clients were all healing. And then I was feeling, as you mentioned, imposter syndrome, this huge,
Mm.
like, just in my gut, I was like, I feel like I'm not telling the whole truth because I'm still sick. Like, and it's not that I wasn't talking about it. I definitely talked about new things that were coming up that I was dealing with on like social media. I don't want to pretend that everything
Yeah.
is perfect, but I was frustrated that my clients were healing and I was still not able to eat most foods. I was still anxious all the time. I just had like random symptoms that popped up out of nowhere.
Mm.
And then I went to a networking event with a bunch of female entrepreneurs, and somebody offered me a free Reiki session. And I was like, okay, let's try it. And that was kind of the beginning of it was the catalyst of opening me up. I had this one session with her. It was remote. She wasn't in the same space as me. And I felt a lot of shifts happening in my body. Like I could feel sensations. And at the end, she told me all this stuff about myself that she couldn't have known because we had just met. And yet she did. And by the way, I was like very averse to anything that wasn't proven or scientific at this point. I wanted the proof. And it was impossible to not believe this because it was so blatantly clear. And she also told me that I was highly intuitive and sensitive and all these things. And I was like, this all makes sense. And, I start crying and I'm like, yes, this all makes sense.
Oh.
So I started working with her every single week.
Mm.
And it was like my anxiety got better. I could eat more foods. I was shifting things in my life that needed to shift and the way that I was presenting myself to the world because I knew that had to happen. And I was getting those messages and those insights about that and those downloads. And then I realized this needed to be part of my practice. So it started with me getting trained in Reiki. I always try to make this story short, and it's never short.
It's fine. No, that's like there's so much magic in the little nuances of the story. And I mean, that's why I love to podcast is like my stories are a million, like they're just so long. Like I need to tell you the details. I need to start from the beginning, but that's where all of the relations of how we listen and how we learn from other people's stories. So please
Yeah.
continue.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I love the affirmation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got trained in Reiki, which isn't really how I do things anymore, but that was what I learned first, and I incorporated it into my nutrition program. Like I started offering my clients and encouraging them as part of their physical healing journey to incorporate at least one Reiki session through their, 12 weeks of working with me. And I started offering them kind of on like quietly to people just as one-off sessions as well. It was definitely not something I was publicly talking about. I was a bit uncomfortable, embarrassed. Like I just didn't come from a world where people do this stuff. So it was very new to my audience, my family, my friends.
Yeah.
But people started coming, and I had a bunch of stuff happen with nutrition clients where they kind of like either fell off the face of the earth, which had never happened to me before, like something terrible happened and they had to leave. Or they would literally just tell me after we did a Reiki session, this is all I want to do now. I just want to do energy healing. Reiki is a form of energy healing, right? And it just started happening that more and more of my clients became spiritually inclined, energy healing inclined clients. And then I wanted to continue opening up my gifts. I was starting to get some messages. You know, if you've ever experienced Reiki or something like that, the practitioner will usually give you messages at the end, share insights with you that you need to hear. And I wanted more of that guidance because my Reiki master, who was my mentor, she would give me so much. And I was like, I want that. So I signed up for a course to further develop my intuition and to connect with a bunch of other women who were on a spiritual path because I felt very alone. I did not know where to talk about it. And I wanted to open up my gifts. And as part of this course program support group, we learned how to read this thing called the Akashic Records. And it wasn't really my intention. I actually didn't care about them and didn't think I would ever use it. I think I'd had like one Akashic Records reading, like my Reiki master had done it for me because she was learning about them as well. But in my mind, it was just like, cool, this is like an added thing. This was definitely not the purpose. And in the course, it was like you were only supposed to be reading your own records. So I was going in every day, and we'll talk a bit more about what the Akashic Records are shortly, I'm sure. But I was starting, it was very easy for me. It worked. It worked in a very different way than how other people were receiving messages, but I was getting a lot of information and a lot of help and guidance. And then people started hearing that I was doing this, even though I wasn't doing it for anybody else. And I wasn't supposed to be doing it for anyone else. And I was getting people sent to me who were asking, hey, can you read my Akashic Records? And I was like, no, I don't do that. And then I got some messages from the powers that be.
Yeah.
And some codes, some attunements, some things floating around in my bedroom at night. All that magical stuff that if you'd asked me a few years ago, I would have said that you were bananas crazy. But it made sense. It was very clear I was supposed to be doing this for other people. And so I said yes eventually, and it worked really well. To be honest, it's a lot easier to read for other people than yourself because you don't, it's not that you don't care, but you don't have
You're
a
not
stake
in your own way. Like,
in what the answers are. Like I still go to other people for readings sometimes. And it just kind of started spreading and everyone started hearing about it. And they were like hearing other people's stories because it is so hard to explain. And I will do my best to explain, but people were having these life-changing experiences in a 1-hour session with me. And suddenly it just became the most fun and most magical thing that I did. And it evolved into my own form. Like if you've had Akashic Records readings and you come to me, everyone who's come to me has said that mine are not like they're different. And I think that's the case with any energy healer, any spiritual, intuitive person. We all do things in our own way. I tend to incorporate a lot of energy healing into my readings. It's not really Reiki anymore. It's once again, like I've been upgraded. I've gotten these like gifts have shifted and transformed into exactly what you need. And that really is the crux of the Akashic Records. It is about connecting to your soul and exactly what your soul wants to tell you. And it gives you exactly what you need. So that's how I got to where I am today. I do single sessions now. I do longer term coaching if people want that kind of coach who has the spiritual pieces so we can incorporate the healing and the intuitive guidance along with the practical stuff. You know, I worked in brand strategy in the past. I am an entrepreneur. So a lot of people come to me for business related things or career path related things or health. We often still incorporate the nutrition elements. I just don't sell it as its own thing anymore.
Yeah.
And I have a community. I have an online community where I meet a couple times a month and do group energy healing and group readings. So you get a reading every month.
Amazing. So if someone's like listening and be like, what the fuck is the Akashic Records? Like, how would you describe that? And just start from there. If it's like an intro to somebody or a deeper explanation of like what that is specifically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course. So, okay, let's get into another dimension a little bit because it's not what we're necessarily used to seeing in this world, but it works. The Akashic Records are essentially, so think about your soul having a long journey through many years, through likely many lifetimes, right? Our souls go on a long journey. And there's no way that you can contain all of that and be aware of all of those different stories and things in this life, in this moment. And we're not really meant to do that. That's not the point, right? We have
Mhm.
lessons that we learn, and sometimes we relearn them. I know I have had certain lessons that I have learned many, many, many times in many lives. Um, but now imagine that your soul has its own library, floor to ceiling, full of books that tell stories all about all the adventures that your soul has been on, is going on now, will go on in the future. When we're in this like quantum space, time isn't really that relevant. So it can know about things that are going to happen from our perspective, right?
Mhm.
Because your soul knows. Okay, so if you can wrap your head around that library, now imagine that you want to pull out the pieces that are really relevant to what you need to know right now. So you can access all of it, right? But a lot of it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
People want to know about, oh, like, can I hear about past lives, or can I hear about this and that? And a lot of the times they're not important to you. They don't help you learn the lessons that you need to learn. But you can tap into them and say, okay, I want to work through this money mindset issue that I'm having. Why can't I make money? Why don't I think I'm worthy of that? What is blocking me?
Mm.
And these answers are contained in your Akashic Records because you get the messages directly from your soul. Your spirit guides hang out in there too. So you got a whole spirit team, but they're speaking to you directly from your soul. So it's not all these different opinions that are outside you. It's what you need to hear. And that
Mhm.
could be a story about something that you've experienced in the past, present, future, or it could simply be a message that you need to hear to activate whatever is going to get you to where you want to go. So if you're going to compare it to something else, like I don't like to say that it's a psychic reading because I don't really feel, I don't like to, it's not like you're asking for what's going to happen because I don't think that's really
Right.
helpful for any of us, right? I mean, I guess some people like to know the future. I don't find that that
Well, it
is,
can quite change, can it, with our own free will and just there's so many different avenues things can go. In any moment we can make a shift and then the trajectory changes. But I feel like the records are so beautiful to give you exactly like what you said, exactly what you need when you need it. Like you don't need to know all the other junk, even though like our curious mind is like, ooh, tell me about the lifetimes I was here and there. But really it's just there to access and to help us currently in the lessons that we have now, which is like usually the things that we're like, oh, why do I keep repeating this pattern? Or, oh, why can't I get past this? And it sounds so specific to that individual instead of maybe picking up a random self-help book or trying a course or whatever that may not really apply to you specifically. It sounds like it's just really lasering in on your specific ailment that you're working with or trying to get over, that hump that you can never get over. And the records offer you this kind of bulldoze way to handle it, of maybe why it's there. Is the visuals that I'm getting through you.
yeah, it's very targeted. So what's
Yeah.
cool, like I just did a reading with somebody yesterday who, like, she's been to other healers and other intuitives, and she was like, I've never gotten such clear information.
Mm.
And it's not that it's better or worse. It's just it's a different, if you want clear
Experience.
information, you're going to get specific answers, and I'm going to share them with you. They won't always be about what you ask about, though. Like
Yeah.
she was asking, I brought up the money thing because that's what she asked. That was one of the areas that she asked about, but she really didn't know where to go with it. And then they started talking about like her living situation. She's been wanting to move. There's things with her house that are making it hard for her to get what she wants financially. There's things with her relationship with her, just the people who she's surrounding herself with and the environment that she's surrounded with. And that's what the messages that came through were all about, that. And she was like, oh, that's so interesting. Because I wanted to ask about that, but I felt like it wasn't time because I feel like that's not what I'm supposed to be focusing on right now. And it was very clear that that was important. And
Mm.
it was very validating too, because it gave her kind of permission to explore more of that now instead of
Mm-hmm.
feeling like she wanted to and she, wasn't allowed or something because someone told her that it was too soon or that it's not the right time. Um,
Yeah.
and that happens with everything. I mean, I've done I just did a bunch of mini readings. I like celebrated my business's 4th birthday, and I wanted to
Yay!
just do these like mini readings. They were little recordings that were 10 or 15 minutes, and a bunch of people bought them. And
Mm.
some people literally just said like they wanted a general reading. They didn't ask any questions. And it's so cool because I got an email back from this one woman, and I'd never met her before. I had no idea who she was. And she just said to me, this was crazy. Like, my jaw dropped to the floor. And I sent this to my friend because I'd been out for lunch with her right before I got your reading. And she asked if like you were sitting under the table. And it was like, because the records knew, her guides knew, her soul knew that this was an area
Mhm.
that was important for her to keep digging into. And it was like, it gave more insights into the things she was already thinking about, but
Mhm.
felt stuck with.
Yes. And that's like the logical brain of like trying to make sense of it, where you're just like, how is this possible? Or like, what do you mean this is like, I think that you truly don't really can't wrap your head around it until you experience it yourself, because you're like, oh, okay. Like you just picture like going through like doing a psychic reading, and you have like all the images that pop up in our brain of like going to someone that has a crystal ball and you're in this weird room and all this stuff of like still kind of in the movies and things like that, and we feel like it's just something so like not true or it could be fake and all these things. And when you do experience it and you're like, holy shit, it's like literally the records of your soul, which still is so logically difficult for some people to kind of like, yeah, really understand until they really experience it. So speaking more about like the clients that you've worked with, I know that you've had massive career shifts and how the records have helped you through that. How has that also played out within your clients that you work with? Is it primarily, or what are the primary themes that you see that the records help out with your specific clients?
That's a great question. I do want to say before this, though, because I
Mm-hmm.
realized we just talked all about the Akashic Records, but I didn't actually tell you what it looks like to go into a reading. Because you were
Okay.
mentioning
Let's do
like
that.
the crystal ball and what it looks like. And I want to make it simple because it really is simple. And then let's talk about themes.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of people get really nervous and they're afraid to book because they don't know what it's going to look like. They don't know what's going to come up. Like, I feel like everyone who comes to me, they'll message me the day before and be like, I'm scared. Um, and really, it's actually, I think what's nice about working with people like me who have been in like the real corporate world, and this relates to the questions that people ask for sure, is that I don't feel, it feels accessible because I'm a very grounded person. Like I'm not, and here's the thing, like some people love the really woo, magical, fairy like yoga teachers and Reiki masters. But for a lot of people, it's like that doesn't resonate for them. And this is really easy because you just get to walk in, have your questions, and that's all you need. And we get to talk about it too as practical people as well as magical people.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what you do is you come with some questions or topics that you want to ask about. If you're not quite sure, we craft the questions together. So you don't need to bring perfect questions because let's face it, if you've never accessed your Akashic Records, you might not know how to ask the questions.
Mm-hmm.
So we always talk about that first. We talk about just like the biggest areas that are coming up for you in your life that you want to get more information on. And then we go in together. We do like a nice little meditation. We get centered into our hearts. We pull out all the, when we talk about energy protection and clearing, we pull out all that stuff so that we can just be in our own little bubble for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then I hit record because that's really important. People definitely listen to these readings a lot of times after. And we just start asking questions and we see what comes up. And the way the messages come through can be in different ways. Sometimes your guides, your soul will just channel messages directly through me and I'll say them exactly as they're coming through, which sometimes means they make a lot of sense to you. And I don't even know what they're saying because they're speaking your language. It's your soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they'll show me visuals that I'll describe. Sometimes there'll be sensations I'll feel. And sometimes they'll guide me to do energy healing. So similar to Reiki, but it's like, imagine if you've experienced Reiki, there's like usually a method to it. Imagine if it were just customized, if your soul was like, this is the healing that you need today.
Mm-hmm.
And that will often be part of your answer, right? If you're asking, how do I heal from this food sensitivity. Maybe part of it is that we need to do some healing on a certain part of your body first, and that will make it easier, right? Along with some things you can do tangibly. And that's really what it looks like. You can ask follow-up questions along the way. We spend like an hour together. I do find people get so much information that it's like maybe a quarterly thing, because you'll keep listening afterwards and you'll get more out of it, because you do get to ask, like, they speak fast. You get a lot of information in that hour.
I find that with my own readings that I've had over many years ago, that I'll have kind of even recently had the nudge or like the ping to like, you listen to that again or reread your notes from this. And then I go back and then it's like something is delivered to me that I needed in that exact moment, that I had no idea that this was like 2-3 years ago. And I'm reading this and I'm like, oh, that and that already happened. And this is where I'm at now. And this is how this is helping me now. So it's like the readings are like a gift for you to kind of evolve with. So I think listening back to those is so powerful. And yeah, it's just, you don't even know what is all in there until you just really let it unfold for you. So it is something that just keeps giving to yourself.
It's also so empowering, like what you said about looking back at notes and things. It's the same way that I love telling clients to go and look at their journal entries from a few months ago if I'm working with them like in a coaching capacity, because you get to go back and be like, wow, like, holy shit, I did so much.
Yes.
And the same with reading. Sometimes you're asking about things and you feel so lost and unsure. And then you go listen later and you're like, oh, wow, I figured that out. That wasn't so bad. And you're proud of yourself.
Yes, exactly. And you're like, oh, I actually don't, that thing that's been bothering me or that block that I've had over the years, like I realized I don't have that anymore when you get to have that self-reflection with yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. So,
okay. So topics
yes.
that people ask about. Okay. Yeah, I do think career on both sides. It's interesting. I feel like I get a lot of clients who are in the corporate world the way that I used to be and happy to stay there, but they're just dissatisfied with their career. They've kind of, and I did this too. I did everything the way that I was supposed to. I was like the perfect poster child for like how you're supposed to live your life if you're born in the 90s or 80s or whatever.
Right.
And they realize after doing this for 5, 10, 20, 30 plus years that they're not happy.
Yeah.
And they want to figure out how to shift into a career that makes them happy, or a career environment. Sometimes it's funny because sometimes they think they know what the problem is, that it's the job, but really it's about the environment or the colleagues or even their mindset, how they feel about themselves and how they let other people's opinions affect them. Like I've been through office bullies in multiple jobs, so I know what that's about. And people can make you feel like you're not good enough or like you don't know what you're doing when you actually do. So when people ask about that stuff, I mean, the answers range so much depending on the person, but it can be about an industry that maybe they haven't explored or a role within the industry they're in that they haven't explored. Maybe the answer is that they just need a different company, or they need to be working with a product that they feel more passionate about, but still doing the same job. And sometimes it is, about making the shift to entrepreneurship, or doing something completely different, going back to school. So that's the other side of people that I get, is people who are either entrepreneurs or who are toying with the idea of becoming them. I mean, I think we always attract people who are like us. So it's all things that I've been through, which, yeah, I'm channeling higher guidance. It's not from me, but it's still great to be able to have a discussion with them about it. And I feel like I can relate so much. So sometimes it's figuring out how to understand yourself better so that you can build a business that works for you, that works for the way that you're designed, for the kind of person that you are, for the purpose that your soul is meant to serve. And that's not to say it won't change, because I do believe that, the previous jobs and areas of specialty that I was in were important for me to do for those times. But it's knowing what's best for you right now and how to get there. Right. And if there are things that are keeping you stuck, a lot of people want to know why their business isn't working, and sometimes it's, yesterday or earlier this week, it was about like, she just wasn't selling the right thing. And she got advice on what she should actually be creating next to sell that would be easy for her, and advice on price point and topics, and it was like quite specific. So it really depends. Sometimes it's really specific because your soul knows exactly what you need to
Wow.
do. And sometimes it's like, you need to go sit in the forest and meditate on X, and then you'll get the message. Like, it really depends on the person and where
Yeah,
they're at. And I always say it's like, if you knew everything, your brain would explode and you also wouldn't learn the lessons. So you do not always get the answer that you want, but you always get the answer that you need. And that's like, I think career and business is definitely like one of the biggest areas that comes up.
biggest themes. And I feel like that's something that's so prevalent in even in the people in my life currently, and what I see kind of all around, and how I even feel personally is like, I think that like there's such an underlying like massive energy wave of really shifting into what you're supposed to be doing here. And I have felt that strongly within myself over the last few years, but and I've noticed that with my dad, like with friends, just so specifically that like the blocks that were blocks beforehand are literally like boulders that are like, yeah, no, you can't keep doing it like this. Like it's like such a pivot shift of this time. So I think having a reading like this, or being able to tap into the Akashic Records for that guidance, because when we do go through those life changes, it can feel very like, the floor just disappears. Like it can feel very ungrounding as like you move through these things, because you're like, I've done this for maybe 10, 20 plus years. And then you're like, what do you mean I'm going to be doing something else? But I think it's so important to like listen to that now, because we are at this, trajectory of really doing what our soul's really, here to do, instead of doing that like societal thing that, is this is the path that you go down and this is what you do. And then a lot of people then just realize like, oh, I'm actually really unhappy right now, and this is not what I want to do. And I know that it takes like experiencing those things to be like, okay, this is what I don't want. But what you had mentioned earlier of like you having the personal experience to offer your clients of like, oh, I was there too, and this is also what your higher guidance and also what my personal experience was going through this. I think that's also our challenges too, because you're like, okay, you're able to offer somebody your own personal experience of you going through that. So it's like, it kind of just brings a lot of, magic along the path that we're on, and really honoring those little different pieces, as you begin to pivot. But other than tapping into the Akashic Records, what would you offer somebody, or maybe that is the thing, like what would you offer somebody of like, okay, they're in this maybe life change shift that they want to make? What would be a good thing that they could do personally to kind of tap in, or how do you tap into those things to kind of start someone on that path?
No, I think that's a great question. And there's so much you can do on your own, right? I want to facilitate and make it easier for you. And some people like need that guide. They want someone with them the whole way to, or just occasionally, maybe it's an annual reading, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's so important for us to remember that like we all have that power and that ability to connect within us if we believe in it and if we want it.
Mm-hmm.
I always say when people ask about like, how can I connect on my own? How can I get these
Mm-hmm.
messages? Getting quiet with yourself is something that we have as a society gotten really bad at doing, because there is so much distraction, so much noise. We have this magical tiny little box that we can hold in our hands all day long and numb out everything and never have our own thoughts. Um, and it's also something where I know like when I was struggling with my health and I was just chronically anxious, I was always looking for those distractions, right? So allowing yourself to be with yourself, which sounds very simple, but like it's not just about meditating. And I think a lot of people, when you first learn to meditate, they're like, clear your mind, don't think about anything. Um, I very
It's
much
a
disagree
lie.
with that.
Same.
I think there's like the monkey mind where it's like, okay, you're having all these thoughts that don't matter. But if you're able to clear your mind initially, why can't you open it up again and ask questions and see what comes through? Because you know yourself pretty well. And I feel like this is like intuitive practice, right? Of just clearing your mind and then asking simple questions and trusting that what comes through is what you need to hear.
Hmm.
And that's a lot of like how I learned how to sense these messages and how to know what is true and what's coming through is just leaning into that trust, like being a little bit delusional for a bit
Mm.
and just saying like, yeah, this is all right. This all makes sense. And, asking your body, how does it feel in your body when you say, oh, I want to do this thing? Does it feel really bad? Does it feel amazing? Does it feel a little scary, but exciting? Um, I think those are all really good ways to just start trusting yourself. And I say this coming from a place of my physical symptoms being all the signs for me. Like, this is why I got really sick, because I needed to get to where I am. And physical symptoms always flare up for me when something isn't aligned, when I'm going in the wrong direction. Like, that's like my cardinal sign, right? So whether or not that's what it is for you, people have different ways of knowing what feels good, but just getting comfortable with that, I think, is a great place to start. Going back to that energy protection discussion we had at the beginning, there is truly nothing better than starting your day by clearing and protecting your energy. Like, I would go get that free meditation, because I have clients who've done it for like literally every day for 6 months, and they're like, I can't go back. And literally, one of my clients I'm thinking of, she'd never meditated before, and she started doing it, and within one day she was like, oh, I'm way less bogged down by my colleagues and less burnt out. And it's so simple, and it's free, and it's very empowering too, because you get to see how you actually can manage your own energy. And that's not to say, like, I still go to healers, I still go to intuitives and readers, and I like being in that energy. I think that's the second part of it, is that when you're developing your ability to connect with yourself and that relationship with yourself, being in the energy of people who are really good at that, who have, learned how to connect in the ways that I have and that so many other people have, is very expansive. And it also just, it's like you get to feel that frequency more often, right? Because you're just sitting in it. So
Yeah.
finding a place to do that is really nice, which is why, like, that's why I started doing my group healing community, because it's like very low cost and people just get to go and feel that energy a couple times a month. And I love hearing the feedback from my community members of how things have shifted and the realizations they've had just from trusting themselves more.
Oh, beautiful. And yes, I just want to interject and say I will put your website and contact information so everybody that's listening right now will be like, what is this? And that'll be in the show notes. So just go down and scroll and you can click the link to join there, because that's just going to be a whole lot of magic to be there to offer you. And I think, like you had said, tuning into your own energy is also about like knowing what you need and when. So it's like, okay, am I feeling like I need a little help with some healing from somebody else? Do I need to get clarification for myself? Do I need to just ask myself and sit with myself? And it's like giving yourself that permission to do what you feel is needed at that time, instead of being like, I have to do it all on my own. Because obviously we're here all together to kind of bridge the knowledge and the experience and mirror to each other and deliver messages to each other and all these things, where like you're not supposed to do it alone. Like, that's why I think the healing journey and everything like that can feel so lonely sometimes, because we're like, oh, all this is wrong with me, and all of this I want to change about my life and I don't know where to start. But being in community, having someone, like you had said, that you offer like longer term coaching with energy healing, with guidance, like you can have somebody there to kind of walk you across that bridge alongside you. And that's like a beautiful offering. What does your offerings, the long-term packages that you had talked about, do those include like coaching calls and energy work? Do you have a certain structure that you work with someone a few times a month, or can you talk about more of that if someone's like, yes, I
Yeah,
need
for
some more
sure.
guidance?
It's funny because when I initially had like my nutrition package, I had a very specific structure, and every session had different things. And when I switched into the way that I'm coaching my clients now, everything just got so much more magical. So
Mm.
the way it works is most people will sign up for, I usually recommend like 3 months is a good place to start. To like, because you want to commit, you want to put your energy into it and be like, yes, I'm committing to making changes and healing and like whatever those goals are. Um, and yeah, basically every month. So in terms of like the logistical structure, there is some structure. There are 3 calls a month with me. You get
Okay.
access to me between sessions. So we have like voice and text messaging between. So I really like, it is like a full-time coaching thing. It's very
Uh-huh.
different than just doing a single reading. And the sessions are 100% intuitively guided, which means I tune into your energy at the beginning of every session. And you also start getting better at tuning into your energy. And some, like, it's great. I have one client, I've been working with her for like a year. She knew nothing about any of this before. And she walked in and she was like, I need a reading about this specific thing today. And she knew. And I was like, you're right. But what happens is, regardless, like, I'm tuning into your energy. I'm pretty much always, the Akashic Records have, like, I've been told by the powers that be that they're kind of part of me now. So every time I get on a call with a client, they are open to some extent. So whether we are doing a coaching call, whether we're doing energy healing and you're lying down and just receiving, whether we're doing an active Akashic reading healing session, you are receiving channeled information. So even like, I had a call with one of my clients who I've been working with for several months. She's building her nutrition business right now, which is really fun for me because she has a lot of the passions and excitement that I had a few years ago. So it's been helpful because I can walk her through how to build some of these things. But as I'm coaching her, I'm also tuning in and seeing what channeled information wants to peek through. So we do a bit of both. We talk strategy and I talk very practical things. And then if there's anything that her soul is like, Kate, you need to know about this, or like her spirit guides are popping in, like, let this girl know. It incorporates all of it. So I would say every session you get healing, coaching, guidance in whatever measure is required for that session. And then I always give like some kind of homework. It's up to you if you want to do it. I find most of my clients are pretty, like, they're go-getters. They will do the homework. I don't usually work with people who don't do their homework because it's fun for me. But I'm like, so I mentioned that I have a journalism degree. That was like my first, what I thought I was going to be doing forever. And journaling in general is like a love language to me. So I always give journal prompts at the end of my sessions that I send to clients of, like, they can be anything. Some of them are super practical about just like a brainstorm for their business or for their career hunt, or for something that they want to, I don't know, if they're going through a food sensitivity healing journey like I was, like, what's the next food that they dream of eating, and start reflecting on that. Sometimes I give them like customized meditations if they're working through something that they have to do every day for the next month. It truly is, it's whatever you need. And I think because I've been able to connect that guidance and trust it, and I know how it feels, I get to be that conduit to bring it to you in the way that you need.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds so magical and so just useful to be able to just go through any kind of life change or even just better your life at any stage. So thank you for sharing that and offering those energetic pieces and following your even own nudges and things of helping people in a new way. I think that is definitely a risk, not risky, but it's like one of those things that you're like, oh, here I go doing this. And like all the people that you're now able to like help their lives transform and offer guidance to them. Like if you didn't choose that for yourself, like, all these people wouldn't have had your guidance too. So I think it's just a lovely, way that you have gotten through and changed your path to then help more people along this path. Thank you so much for sharing. Is there anything else that you'd like to offer, or anything that's popping up that you want to talk about a little bit, at the end of our chat that's kind of coming up? Is there anything that you think someone could know, or anything that's coming up for you to share?
Yeah. And I want to say thank you so much for those words. That means a lot to me. I feel so grateful to have been able to found something that I actually love doing so much and I get to help people. Like, it feels very genuine. And I think that was something that was always important to me. And I just tried to ignore it. I tried to believe that I could do something I wasn't passionate about as a career. And it was just making me sick and burning me out. So yeah, it feels really good to know that. I would say last things are, just in the practice of trusting yourself, and, not just in terms of like my services and what we're talking about, but if anything is coming up in your awareness or has come up a couple of times and it's piquing your interest, like, trust those nudges. I think, because Erica, you were talking about how, when you need to book a reading or book a healing or what kind of support you need. I mean, I don't even think we didn't even talk about this on the call, but like you and I know each other because we're in a
Oh, yes.
mastermind.
We didn't
Um,
even introduce. Yeah.
like
Uh,
but that's, we both made the choice that we needed that level
yeah.
of support, and we wanted that level of community and ambitious women, and we wanted it to be led by someone who is an intuitive channel. Like these are
Yes.
all decisions that we made, and I don't think it was open very long. Like we had to decide fairly quickly what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I say this to just tell people, like, if you're wondering, like, oh, is this right for me? If it feels really good for you, there's probably a reason that it keeps popping up and that you can't stop thinking about it.
Hmm.
Um, even for that course that I took where I learned how to read the Akashic Records, I had no idea that's where it was going, but I knew that I needed to do it. So start to look for those little signs and like sneaky messages from the universe of, if you are feeling stuck or lost and you need that support and you're just not sure what it is. That's a really good intuitive practice of learning to trust yourself.
Yes. It's so true. Like it's, it was, yeah, the container that we met in was like, yeah, it was very fast. And I had to like decide what I've noticed within myself of how now I make decisions or start to tune in that I had never really been familiar with is like tuning into my body sensations around a decision. Because I kind of spent most of my early years just kind of ignoring anything that came up and just pushing past anything that I was feeling, like if it was an emotion or if it was, something like being tired, I'd be like, I would just ignore it and continue. And so I just really stopped listening to like my body cues and like what my intuition was really telling me to do. And so after I had started to unravel that piece and start to really tune into that piece, it was like it's easier to make decisions related to that. And it was a very strong yes for me to be like, I want to be in a container that other women are energetically in tuned and want to create something beautiful and want to lead with their intuition. And yeah, we met through, Christina the Channel's um, mastermind, and being able to be surrounded around people that are in that kind of frequency and caliber. And it's just been life changing for me. And that's how like joining containers or readings or um, group healings can kind of help us like just feel seen for one, because you're like, oh, everybody's interested in this too. And then it also just feels really good to like feel into that energy with everybody. And it that in itself has been expansive. And that's why we, put ourselves out there to create these containers and podcasts and courses and things for us to continue to help each other along that path. But you're so right.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
completely agree. Like whether it's a one-on-one or a group coaching relationship,
Yeah.
feeling seen, I think especially when you're going through something like a spiritual awakening or even a curiosity, you often can feel very alone because depending on like the environment that you grew up in, I know for me, I was just like, I don't have anyone to talk to about this.
Mhm.
Everyone thinks I'm crazy.
Yeah, right. Usually, like you're the first to like kind of go on your path, and you're like, oh, okay, this is kind of weird, but so many people are into it. If it's not in your physical, space or town or city, but you can definitely find people, and I think that's the beautiful part of like the internet and Zoom and all these spaces that we can connect,
Mhm.
on the internet and stuff. But yeah, definitely not alone. There's so many people are diving
Yeah.
into it.
And
Yeah.
it's funny, the last thing I'll say, like you can ask for things too, like trusting in the universe. The way that you were saying, like you decided on the mastermind, I asked the universe for a mastermind, like before she announced it.
Yeah,
And then it came up and I was like,
that
well, I
must be
guess this is
it.
it. Like,
I love that. Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah, asking for that relationship and being in more conversation with the energy and just being like, okay, I need help with this, or I need this person, or just really putting that energy out there is like remembering that we can tune into to ourselves and that we are part of that co-creation dynamic, which is such a, I think, a way, like a new way of life. Like it's a new way of existing in the world, even though we're physically not different, but it's the way that I have operated in the world the last like 2 years of really diving into this way of life and continuing my further awakenings. It's like you just operate in the world differently. And that's kind of what's going to help us all shift even further. But yeah, thank you so much for being here and for being on the podcast and sharing your story and your offerings. And I have had such, I just really value and appreciate everything that you have shared today. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. I had the best time talking with you, and just excited for whatever's next.
Yeah, and I'll put all of her information in the show notes. So if you could go over your website and your Instagram where people can find you, you can just say that now, and then I'll just put that in the chat too for them to click the link.
Yeah, so my business is Rooted by Jordana, like a tree. So you can find me at Rooted by Jordana pretty much everywhere, but I mostly hang out on Instagram. My website is rootedbyjordana.com. Like my email, it's all there.
All of it. Okay.
And all the information about my services is there. And I love having conversations about this stuff because no matter where you're at, like I've probably been in that position. And so if you want to like hop in the DMs and even have a voice message chat because you want to learn more, I'm super open to that. So don't be shy.
Beautiful. Yay. All right. Thank you. So now put that all below.